Okay, we are now recording.
Thank you. It is March 12th, and this is a regular meeting of the Community Resources Committee of the Town Council. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2025, which extends through June 30 of 2027, the ability of public bodies to meet in a remote or hybrid manner without a quorum of members in person, this meeting will be conducted via remote means. Members of the public who wish to access the meeting may do so via Zoom or by telephone. No in-person attendance of members of the public is possible, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. We have a quorum, and I'm going to call the meeting to order. It is 1:01, and I'll just go around the screen. Mandy Johanneke.
Present.
Andy Churchill.
Here.
Jennifer Taub.
Here.
And Pam Rooney is here. We will wait on Councillor Walker. We'll catch her when she comes in. There are no public hearings scheduled for today, and I'm looking to see if we have any attendees. There are no attendees in the audience. Therefore, I'm going to skip the general public comment session and move directly into the action items. On the action items today, we have clean energy bylaw, meeting minutes that were made available to us, and then one important portion of the ZBA and planning board vacancy notices. And that we will get to in a minute. And there is Councillor Walker. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Pam.
Great, great. So starting with action, the first action item, the clean energy bylaw, the staff made a final pass and provided us a list of half dozen suggestions that are pretty clearly identified in the text as well. And I wonder if we could ask Mandy Johanneke if she could edit as we go, because you do such a good job with that. And we can clear up these elements that were identified by staff. Before we step into this, I just want to give a quick heads up that I need to leave at 2, and I think we can appropriately shorten this meeting to accommodate that without having to make Andy have to do anything out of the ordinary. So I think we can get through the clean energy bylaw, the meeting minutes, and then we have actually one action item for the ZBA and the planning board, and those are the vacancy notices. And I think I'm pretty sure we can handle that within 1 hour, because I need to leave at 2. So let's go. Stephanie, do you want to walk us through the staff comments, and we can correct and adjust as necessary in our text?
I think typically what we've done is just go through where they are.
Okay.
Because what I did was I incorporated that separate page of notes.
Yes,
into
which
this
is great.
document. So if you actually just scroll, go to wherever
Happy.
there's an edit.
Happy to do that. Okay. So the comment by staff is that all references to CMR be generic. So 225 CMR 29 instead of 29.00 or whatever seems totally appropriate. Mandy, do you want to do that en masse right now? Or do you want to do that as something to follow up on?
I'll do that as we see them.
Okay. Okay, because we are going to make a pretty big leap to the 18.08.
Yeah.
So 18 point, go ahead.
I don't think we have too many of them on.
Yeah. Yeah. So 18 point, actually 18.0804D says made changes to 18.08.03. We think this is the best place to reference other local regs, added language to include zoning bylaw sections, and Aaron's comments at the end. Suggestion, possibly remove 18.08.04D1 as it is redundant with 18.08.03. What is the text of D1, 18.04?
It's this in red that
Yeah.
references CMRs, which are also referenced up here.
So is everybody comfortable with removing D1? Yes. Great. 18. You want to jump to 13? No.
Are we okay with all the changes in 180803? This whole section that was added? And this part.
I'm comfortable with it. I'm 1 out of 5. And I appreciate the fact that staff added this as they're the ones that end up administering these projects. So they have a good perspective. Mandy, what's the remaining little note? Yeah, right there with the bubble.
That was just the same comment. Best
Oh,
place
okay.
to reference.
Okay. And we're on our way. Oops. Do you want to get rid of the zeros after CMR 22.00? So the staff comment was that we don't need to be so specific because in fact those CMR text may change at some point.
So Stephanie, this was a move from fences, right?
Yes,
And it's just the same language that we had proposed to put in fences?
yes, I believe so.
I had a question about it, not the move. I think the document said that something still needed to be listed in um 6.20 that says fencing associated with solar investor subject to section 18, not section 6. So
So
we
that
need
would
to
be
add, I think we need to add that to the bottom part of other parts of the bylaw that change.
Nate has his hand up.
sorry, Nate.
Sure. Yeah, sorry, I was a bit late. Thanks, Nate here. Yeah, I think we're trying to keep everything contained within this new section of the bylaw. However, certain other sections regulate things. So for fences in 6.20, it already excludes some other areas. And so we'd add a phrase that says, like any fencing related to solar and BESS, go see 18. So that way, like the setbacks for fences, everything would then, is all here. So we already have setbacks established here, heights here that are different than the rest of the bylaw. So really it's just a kind of a cross-reference to let people know for solar and BESS, go to this section of the bylaw and don't read section 6.20.
But we're gonna need language. Because it will need included when we propose this. Because it has to be changed at the same time.
Good. Okay, section 13.03, 13.03, vegetative area. There was a suggestion to say that chemical application can only be used to establish vegetation or remove it.
I think somehow I accepted that change here
Yeah,
before we
looks like
saw
it.
it. I'm not sure how. I thought I was only accepting one change, but I must have accepted more.
So it says vegetative areas shall only be subject to chemical fertilization or herbicides, pesticides for those applications that are necessary to get vegetation established.
Yeah, quickly, if I would jump in, or the suggestion was just remove this statement altogether if we think it was in conflict with, some of the legal rulings that Mandy had cited. So, we're saying that, so staff thought this was still okay and applicable, and could be regulated. But if we think it is still, something that's inconsistent with state law and how the Attorney General has been ruling on it, then we can, we thought removing it would be fine as well. This whole statement.
I kind of like having it as a reminder that they shouldn't just go whole hog with chemical use just to knock vegetation down.
I think I'm fine with leaving it in for now and seeing what our attorney says when they review it.
Right. I think we missed one, Mandy. If you could scroll back to
Did we?
18.18. I think it's
Oh,
the
the
text.
waiver section. Like I said, I think
Yeah.
I accidentally accepted changes. Yeah, that shouldn't have been accepted. So I'm not seeing them on here. I don't know. I thought it was a view thing, but I don't know how. I thought I was only accepting the fence change. Seems to have accepted more. So this is the new proposed language.
Yep. Yep.
Nate's got his hand raised.
Oh, sorry. Yep. I'm looking at text like this.
Oh, yeah,
Nate.
that's fine. Yeah. So the original section, this was called special permit waivers, and it was saying that an applicant could ask for a special permit to modify parts of the bylaw. And it was like before the close of the hearing. And so, with staff, that's not really how it would work, because that's actually a separate application that would have to be done at the time of submittal. So the way this is written is that waivers are allowed. There's already some provisions for waivers in the dimensional standards. And so we wrote it as an applicant can ask the PGA to waive sections of this bylaw. and it would be done during the hearing process. So it's not like a new special permit application, it's a waiver. And, I'm not sure if that was the intent or if you wanted to actually have things be a special permit. So we, in the way it would normally work, we have in the zoning bylaw, we have waivers, which are not special permits. And then we have the footnotes in the dimensional table or some things that are special permit requirements. So to me, if you want things to be special permit requirements, it's different than a waiver. Or it could be a waiver that's granted through a special permit by the same permitting granting authority. So it's like if it's a site plan review use, the planning board is the waiver, the special permit granting authority, and could do that waiver as well. It changes the process a little bit in terms of application and actual procedurally. So I just wanted to let you know that. So we wrote it this way. It might be different than what the original section was intended to do.
Stephanie,
Would you
and I
like,
thought Andy,
Oh.
and then Mandy.
very quickly, I was going to ask if you wanted me to read the short paragraph that was struck, that was below waivers shall not be granted, the last sentence of that section. It's short. I
Sure.
just didn't know, because that was
Sure.
the one that was struck, but you're not seeing it.
Sure.
Okay, so in the case of a special permit, such requests must be made by the applicant no later than the close of the public hearing. An affirmative or negative vote under this paragraph shall not be construed as an approval or disapproval of the special permit sought. That was the paragraph that was struck.
Thank you. Yeah. Mandy.
Yeah, if I'm remembering correct, the initial genesis of this section completely was from the draft model bylaw. I don't think it was in our original working document that we were doing before Kathy and I sort of melded everything together. So I can imagine that draft model bylaw, certainly I think we just pulled the language from that and always just said, is this needed, right? We didn't know, but we threw it in. So it wasn't originally crafted for Amherst and how Amherst does things. So with that in mind, I'm completely happy and okay with what the planning department thinks is best, because we just pulled language from a statewide thing.
Mhm. Nate, it seems this simplifies the process if it's a waiver within the original process.
It does. And so, the last statement here says waivers will not be granted for section 3 or 5 of this this section of the zoning bylaw. You could always add more. So essentially they can't waive certain things in those sections. What it's allowing it to do is maybe waive some, setback requirements or whatever else may be in the bylaw. So you could add sections here and you could add criteria. So there's 2 criteria that the permit granting authority would have to find to allow a waiver. So, an applicant would say, oh, I want to waive something. And then the permit granting authority would have to make written findings that it doesn't do these 2 things. And you could always add to that. So we think it simplifies it. That's kind of the way waivers would usually work. Typically in our bylaw and site plan review, it says, for, it's like aesthetics, site design, and safety, right? So it's like if those things are still being met and there's a waiver granted, then the planning board would consider it. If somehow it impacts those ideas or those criteria, then it wouldn't be waived. And so we could always add a third one here, but we think this makes it easier and kind of how it actually happens during permitting.
So this is not, this is just tables 5 and 3. Is that correct? So accessory uses and or use tables are the only firm elements. Does that make sense? Is that what I'm reading?
That's how I interpreted it, Pam.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think we also want to say, sorry, I think it was also subsections of 18. So I don't think we want to waive, I was just trying to look at in another document. 1805 are the pre-filing requirements, and 03 are our definition. So maybe it's not that, but I think for instance, I don't know if we want to waive. Staff had talked about, are there certain sections of this bylaw of 18 we don't want waived? And so there's sections of the regular zoning bylaw, and then there's sections of 18. And so I think, part of it would be we want to also determine, we don't want someone to have a light submission and then get into permitting and be like, oh yeah, I request to waive all these pre-submittal requirements. Or maybe we do, I don't know. So that's a question actually, is like, are there sections of 18 we really don't want to be allowed to waive? And so usually we wouldn't allow the submittal requirements. They can always ask it, but we try to hold firm on that. Usually they're asking for waivers from dimensional standards or something, not, a type of plan.
My reaction to that is if you start to list elements of this section 18, I mean, we have 19 or 20 sections of it, right? If we start adding every section that is immutable and can't get a waiver, it's really redundant with everything that's in the preceding document.
I think I would just prefer to trust the PGA to not waive something they think should not be waived because they don't have to grant the waiver.
Yeah.
We ready to move on?
Yep. And then the next item was 19.012. Inspection reports was added. That makes total sense. And removal of that last sentence makes sense. The 19.02 reporting requirements for agrivoltaics. I thought this requirement was listed in the state template. Maybe it wasn't. It makes sense to have a very modest report for the first 5 years of operation. I mean, they're theoretically are granted leniency, if you will, if we're going to a system that also incorporates agriculture, and 5 years of operation does not seem burdensome. Anybody disagree or want to? I see no hands.
I was trying to look up the state reporting requirements, at least in the model bylaw.
Andy?
This is a report they already have to produce anyway.
I was under that impression. I may be wrong, but I thought they did. If they want to be qualified as a agricultural, whatever, can't remember what the ASTGU stands for. Jennifer?
I mean, doesn't it, if it says required by the state, so
Yeah.
If they're already doing it, then it doesn't seem like too big an ask, but
Yeah.
ASTGU is agricultural solar tariff generation units.
Nate.
I just looked it up.
Thank you. Yeah, good. Nate.
Yeah, this is the only time where this acronym is used, so I was going to suggest, spelling it out like what Mandy just said, because I also had to look it up. So, someone can, an owner can qualify or propose that it be an ASTGU, and then they have to do a number of things to meet it, and some of it is this reporting based on the website. It's through DOER, but to me, it's not. Someone could do photovoltaics over farmland and not be this. I think it's like something they would. I don't know. To me, it seems like something they would opt into, and then they'd have to follow or meet the requirements. But I think the bigger question for staff is agrivoltaics. If we jump down to table 3, is there isn't really much in the definition. It says agricultural purposes. We have a lot of questions about that. And then kind of how is it tied to submittal requirements and other things? And so, we have a bigger question of, what is the purpose of agrivoltaics? And, is it that the farmland, that it has to be a certain kind of farmland before there's solar on it? And then does the farmland is it required to be maintained as farmland? How do you define farmland? So right now in this bylaw, it doesn't say anything like that. It just says used for agricultural purposes. So for instance, you could reference the MGL section, for the Dover Amendment, is it income producing? And so, falls within the definition of how we define canopy, but solar on farm field doesn't always have to be a canopy. It could just be ground mount. And so I think for staff, the question really is, if you want agrivoltaics, maybe we have to talk about it. Like what's the purpose? How is it tied to some of the existing conditions, documents we're requiring as part of submittal? How is it tied to other things in the bylaw? Excuse me. And then how do we define it or monitor it? So for instance, if, a property owner is like, oh, I have 10 acres, I'm going to put, agrivoltaics in, for the 20-year lease or program. Do they have to then show every year that they're still meeting the definition of active agriculture? Agricultural purposes right now, to me, in the bylaw, in this section, the way it's defined, we have no idea what it means, right? It could be like someone's just growing wildflowers or something. And so, if we want it in there, I think there's ways to tie it into some of the things we have, like prime farmland, or do you link it to, DAR stuff or chapter land? Anyways, I there could be ways to make it work. We're just not sure right now. How even define it necessarily. Someone could not do anything with their farmland, and all of a sudden they're saying like, oh, I'm going to do agrivoltaics because maybe it's permitted easier than a ground mount. So staff's position was, when you get to a certain size solar installation, whether or not it's agrivoltaics or ground mount, there's impacts. And so we were originally thinking
correct.
We were originally thinking that would be part of this tier 1, the ground mount. But because it's defined as a canopy installation, because there's uses underneath it, it isn't. So you could change the definition of canopy to exclude farmland, and then it becomes a ground mount. So I guess some of it would be just having a little discussion about what the purpose or the goal of agrivoltaics is. And
I can share with
Sure.
you the binder, the folder that's this thick, with all the background information that the working group went through to try to maybe not define, but certainly to incorporate the opportunity for agrivoltaics in Amherst, given that that's it's such a widely accepted land use. This is perhaps an opportunity. Mandy, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, what Nate just said is making me rethink or unthink or something. He said that he originally and the staff originally thought that agrivoltaics would likely fall under tier 1 because they weren't canopy. Tier 1's over here, or any of these tiers, right? Ground mount, that they'd fall under ground mount because they weren't canopy. But the definition that we have for canopy doesn't prohibit any particular uses from
Right.
qualifying as a underlying uses underneath uses as qualifying as canopy. So I'm curious, Nate, why did you think this definition that I think the staff provided for canopy? I'm not sure. Because I think I made up the ground mount one that excluded canopy and building mount because we didn't have a ground mount one. If that's the definition of canopy, why did staff think that that would not include agrivoltaics?
I think it should include agrivoltaics. Maybe we add that.
Well, but I guess his comment was that they never thought agrivoltaics would fall under canopy. They thought it would fall under ground mount tiers.
Well, I
And
think,
so I'm confused as to why they thought the definition they provided for canopy does not include agrivoltaics.
Nate?
yeah, I think there's maybe a few answers. One is that when we were looking, there's no standard for agrivoltaics. So, if there's installations on farmland, in Massachusetts or elsewhere, it's not like building code or electric code or anything defines it as having to be canopy. It seems like maybe that's just like an industry standard or a preference, but it's not actually a defined thing. And so what we're saying now is that, we're essentially saying that a canopy is anything that has other uses underneath the solar. But we've always thought that under ground mount, you still could have other uses. And so, I guess when we were reading the definition of canopy, typically we'd say that's under or it's over impervious surface, not anything that could be any other use, right? So you could have, it might just not be farmland, it could be other things. And so, and then in the definition of agrivoltaics, I think you say it is a canopy mounted system, but in other places, it might just be, a ground mount system. And so I think it was just staff's idea that, that, like I said, at a certain point, agrivoltaics can be impactful. And so how different really is it permitting wise? And so if we're going to say, okay, well, let's keep agrivoltaics as a definition, we'd want to then create a tier definition, almost like we do for ground mount. So that, if you're an agrivoltaic and you're less than a certain size, sure, maybe that's a by right use. If you're over a certain size, it's site plan review, right? Because if you have 40 acres of agrivoltaics on a farm field, that's 40 acres. To me, for staff's perspective, it's no different than a ground mount system, maybe in terms of how you'd want to permit it or regulate it. Unless the idea was to try to encourage farmland to stay farmland because agrivoltaics might be a way to keep active farmland being used for farmland and not.
That's correct. That's correct.
Right, and not being changed. And so I know there's probably reasons. I guess the question was, how do we differentiate that through permitting, and do you want it to be different? So do you want large agrivoltaics to be simply a yes, administrative approval or some site plan review? And, how do you tie it to some of the submittal requirements? I guess the bigger question is, what is an agricultural purpose under the proposed definition of agrivoltaics?
Stephanie.
I just wanted to say that in answer to Nate's question, that is exactly the purpose, was to preserve prime farmland, which is what the working group had worked to, wanted to protect. And I think the question, so for instance, last night, the Energy and Climate Action Committee reviewed the draft. They don't have any comments, but they did sort of have a question about agrivoltaics, and that, if a farmer wanted to install, 5 acres of solar voltaics somewhere on his property that would have been used for growing, but there's a portion where he or she would rather put in solar to sort of help defray some costs of the operation, would that be allowed? That was one of the questions they had. So does it prohibit the use of farmland entirely for the use of solar if you're not having a dual purpose?
Wouldn't
And
that
I
be
don't
an
think-
accessory use then?
Yeah.
Well, we're defining accessory use as behind the meter. So, essentially it's accessory to the farm operation. Sorry to jump in. So, for instance, if a farm wanted to do it behind the meter and they're generating electricity, whether or not they, it's all used by the farm operation, that's accessory. If they're going to have 5 acres and go directly to the grid, that's another principal use. The way we have it set up now in the table, in the way we're proposing it. And so, Stephanie, to your question, if a farmer was saying, well, we're going to do this and not use it for farmland, to me, that goes to a ground mount system. It's now a ground mount system. It's not agrivoltaics, and it's still allowed if it's, according to the chart there. So, I mean, it's an interesting question. That's the way staff would interpret it, right? We would try to put it to the use classification that it would most likely fall in if it's not clear. And so if a farmer came in and said, I want to put a solar system in, but I'm not going to use it for farmland, we would say, well, according to the definitions here in this chart, we would say it's a ground mount system now, and you're going to go through that kind of permitting.
I don't really have a problem if it's canopy style or ground mount style. That doesn't really affect my interpretation of the agrivoltaics. Part of me says, and this is clearly we haven't spent a lot of time on agrivoltaics. My gut feeling is that if something is if it's accessory to agriculture, it should fall into, it feels like it could fall into the top category, which is building mounted canopy solar voltaic installations under 25,000 kilowatts. And likely, if it's with BESS, however, whether if it had any kind of battery storage, it would then automatically go into the categories with battery storage. And Mandy.
Yeah, I get what Nate is saying regarding dual primary uses for, say, a farm that's 80 acres and they're going to put 5 acres of solar on and leave the other 75, that they might be 2 primary uses then. I'm still struggling with the canopy definition, because it sounds like from what Nate is saying that the issue that the planning department is having is not necessarily with the definition of agrivoltaics per se in the bylaw. It's with their definition of canopy that allows agrivoltaics to be canopy. We added that they were in the agrivoltaic definition, but I'm not seeing, if we delete the agrivoltaic definitions, why that suddenly would make them ground mount, given the definition of canopy that has been provided to us and that is proposed for this bylaw that says on a raised structure allowing for the continued use of the area beneath for another function. Now, agriculture is not listed as that function, but it doesn't prohibit agriculture from being the other function. So I don't understand why simply deleting agrivoltaics from the bylaw would solve the concern that Nate is expressing that the planning department has regarding agrivoltaics being canopy installations. I'm not concerned with them being canopy. I think even if it's 40 acres and there's another use, if that's a yes, and ground mount would be a special permit, I see that as ensuring or potentially encouraging the exact reason we wanted agrivoltaics, which was to keep the farmland in use. And so that split, I would want the agrivoltaics to be an easier permitting pathway than a similar sized solar array that does not do agrivoltaics underneath. So I guess I'm still struggling with what the planning department's concern regarding adding an agrivoltaics definition in when canopy SPI that they provided includes agrivoltaics.
And I'm in agreement with you that I'm thinking we can add it, because it just says under canopy SPI, including but not limited to, you're right, agriculture can fit under that. But if we add it specifically, I think that's great. And I don't know what canals, we don't have any canals in Amherst. I think we could scratch canal. It's got to be Holyoke, maybe. Yeah. Nate.
Sure, yeah, no, I don't think it's so much the definition of that it's a canopy. I think the definition of agrivoltaics is also needs improvement. You say it's a canopy use, which then has agricultural purposes, and I think it's the agricultural purposes is very unclear, and so it's not tied to anything. Like I said, like the MGL definition or anything. It's not tied to prime farmland. So, if I have a 20-acre property, I clear all my land, I cut all my trees down before I do solar, and then I say it's going to be agrivoltaics, it's going to be an easier permitting than if I do ground mount and say I'm going to cut down my trees at the same time, right? So someone is going to figure out a way to kind of game the system and say they're doing agrivoltaics and say they're doing it for agricultural purposes if we don't somehow define agricultural purposes. Like, does it have to be an active agriculture so many years before they apply for the solar? And then how do we monitor or know that it stays in active agriculture after they get permitted and have the solar? And so to me, the canopy thing isn't an issue. I think if we define agrivoltaics, that would help or have conditions for it. And then I think in the use chart, staff might want to have then a separate use classification for agrivoltaics, not just for the canopy, and maybe have tiers, because I'm not sure we'd want to have anything less than 25,000 be just a yes, because that is a really big installation. And so,
Mandy.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Sure.
But your canopy, parking lot canopy can be anything less than 25,000 kilowatt hours under the use table that you proposed with a yes.
Right. And so, but where in town would you have a 100-acre parking lot? Whereas I might have a 100-acre open area.
So we have a little bit of time. The planning board will be discussing this. And I think I'll also take it on as sort of a homework assignment to sort through some of the material that was provided by the working group in terms of better definitions of agrivoltaics. I mean, it gave examples, but it's like it's not limited to crops, crop production, hay, grazing. Those are three categories that were listed.
Yeah, so staff thinks it could work. We would just want some clarity on it so that, for instance, if there was a bylaw now, we'd have a hard time making sure that someone is actually an agricultural purpose, right? So if there's just some clarity or, like I said, more criteria or conditions, and if we want to make sure that it is part of this canopy section in the use charts, then we can, again, it'll work. We just want to make sure that we all understand where it would fall and be consistent with that application and implementation after, say this were adopted. So, there's no question, like if someone came in and said, okay, I want to do agrivoltaics, we would be really clear, okay, here's where you fall in the use chart and here's how you meet that definition. And so as long as we have that, then I think staff would be fine. Right now, we're just not sure we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
So, okay. So we have to be able to point to use tables and and what was the other one?
The definition or how we define, yeah.
Okay, great. Okay. Let's keep going then. So yeah.
I'm just fixing that. So we're
Yep.
removing this. And we're deleting all of that. Because we're
And
not
that's going
making
to
the
go
changes. But we need the language that will go in 6.2 that says for BES and SPI, 6 doesn't apply.
Is that something, Nate, that you want to take on?
Sure, yes, yep. Yeah, I made a note to
Okay.
myself already, so I'll
Okay.
do that.
Great.
And that's it. I've added the comments or responses to comments regarding the agrivoltaic discussion.
Yeah. So we, as I said before, we have a thank you for getting through that. And very helpful, Nate, to have you here. So on the 26th, the planning board is, I think you said, is going to be looking at least part of the time on the 8th. They're meeting on the 18th and they're meeting on April 8th. And so feedback that we get, we would presumably get as soon after the meeting on the 8th as short report can be put together if there are any major concerns. That gives us we have on April 9, we have a presentation of design standards. That's probably going to take a fair amount of time. I'm thinking it will take most of our April 9 meeting. So our next opportunity would be on the 23rd to incorporate what we hear from the planning board, what we hear if come back from, I'm looking at my calendar here, sorry. Mandy.
Yeah, is there any way this has to get to town council for referral, and the plan was to do that on the 27th, but it would be great if it was earlier. I don't know if it can be earlier, but is there a way to maybe swap the downtown design and the next time we deal with clean energy so that on April 9th, we're pushing it out of our committee back to the council for referral for hearings?
From my perspective, that could work, but it doesn't, there's no town council meeting any sooner than the 27th. So it's not like
Right.
we've got.
But on the 23rd, the council meeting's already being noticed for the 27th, and it won't have a document until the 24th to the councilors. It's just, and you'd need reports and all by the 24th.
For the meeting on the
For the meeting on the 27th, or else it gets pulled from the meeting on the 27th. Because counselors need an insane amount of time to read this and understand it.
Yeah. I'm going to look at Nate and say, or Dave or Stephanie, if Jeff Bagg could come and talk to us on another date, that would free up the 9th. We also then would have some time. We have some time on the 26th for sure to talk about this.
I'm actually meeting with Jeff in an hour. I can talk to him about that. I don't see a big issue with it. Nate, do you?
I mean, actually, so if we're meeting on the 26th of March, we can spend a fair amount of this meeting working through anything that we come back with on agrivoltaics, and the pieces that were outstanding today. That frees it up. Then we have a council meeting on the 6th. And that might be enough time. Well, we will not have heard back from the planning board until at least after their meeting on the 8th of April.
We're
And I
aiming
think
for
that,
the, yeah, we're aiming for the April 27th meeting.
yeah,
It's just if we don't finalize till the 23rd, I'm not sure it can stay on the 27th.
okay, I see what you're
Unless
saying.
you've got a ton of time after the 23rd and into the 24th in the morning to get it all ready and done and reported out.
I would probably do a lot of it ahead of time if I could.
I just
Um,
figure the 9th gives you more time.
I think I like that suggestion. Let's try to do that. If we could have Jeff meet with us another time, I think that would be helpful. And maybe we'll have a conversation early next week on just which day it might be. Okay.
Okay, that sounds fine. I'll
Okay.
mention that to him when I meet with him.
Okay. So, and Mandy, you and I can work out some of the scheduling in terms of what needs to come to the council for the referral. Andy.
If we're talking about this on the 9th and the planning board is talking about it on the 8th, are we going to know what they talked about, or is it going to be too soon for us to have that input? And what do we need to, are we trying to forward something that has the planning board's input incorporated when we send it to the council?
Typically, yes, we would like to do that, even if it's commentary. Nate, you've got your hand up, sorry.
Yeah, I kind of had the same question Andy just asked, but I guess my first question would be, would you still want to have Dotson come on the 9th and present the downtown design standards? I just would want to, it sounds like it will, I think that they'll, it will be probably like an hour presentation there, it'll be similar to yesterday evening. They'd want to introduce the standards to everyone and then receive comments. And then the idea would be that, the CRC can meet without them at subsequent meetings and talk about the standards. They might come back in a few months back to the same boards they presented to now, but it's a lot of information. And so, they were there really just to try to provide an introduction, and then, we can, there's a webpage with the information for the standards. So, the CRC, if you read it ahead of time, you might have a lot of questions and it'll just be a chance to engage with them. But it is probably like an hour and a half, right, of time for that topic.
Yeah.
So,
My gut feeling, and I appreciate Mandy pointing this out, if we have last minute details that we really need to work through on April 9, it would be better not to have Dodson Flinker come on the 9th.
all right, and then my second question, like what Andy asked, is it okay if it's referred without, the planning board's comments? So I think, I think, what's nice is we're getting it to them, say before, they'll have the 18th. I've already sent them the draft, the other week and asked them to read it. And so I think what we're trying to do is get them, familiar with it so that they're, they can move quickly when it's referred back during the hearing process. And so, it could be that their comments are just withheld until it actually comes back to them, and then they can make them. Because I think they will have them, they will have it on the 18th. We're trying to get at least an hour of discussion on the 18th for them on this. And so I can report back. I can always be there on the 9th as well, if needed, just to report back what happened on the 8th. But I can encourage them to really try to get comments to me earlier, and so that, you have them. And so I don't, we're trying to get Dodson to get to all the boards and committees, say in the next month. if we push it out to the end of April, maybe that's okay. I just want to make sure that's going through a process, and then, the clean energy bylaw is also going through a pretty good process. And so,
Yeah.
know,
If the planning board discusses this bylaw to any extent on the 18th, I think simply having notes of what their comments and maybe concerns are would be very helpful. That could be relayed to us, in an email. They will talk about it again on the 8th, and frankly, I'll probably be listening. So, we can also try to incorporate whatever we hear of their concerns into our conversation on the 9th. And then we will have a document as complete as we can. And that's what will go to council for referral. Any questions? And then we want to maybe change gears here. Mandy.
So another option, if the planning board's thinking of sort of incorporating all of their questions, concerns during the hearing process, is that we get whatever they say on the 18th, and on March 26th, we deal with that, add in the language that we need to be added into section 3, article 3, and section 6.2 on fences, address the agrivoltaics on the 26th, and then vote to send it to the council requesting a hearing. The hearing process start. That could happen on April 6th, then 3 weeks earlier, while the planning board's still doing non-hearings on it too. And we could still then do the downtown design standards then on April 9th. We wouldn't have to move that, because we wouldn't then have to deal with the clean energy until we started our hearing.
Well, if people feel comfortable not getting the full barrage of planning board comments, we incorporate what we hear on the 18th from them. That certainly could work. Andy.
Yeah, I'd like to keep the two tracks going. I don't want to have CRC fall behind everybody else on the downtown design standards either. So if that seems, if that'll allow us to refer this and get planning board input at an appropriate time, and then we can talk about design standards in the planned sequence, I'd just as soon do that.
Okay, so we'll keep our discussion on the 26th will be solar bylaw. And we can take care of the ZBA stuff in pretty short order. That's not an issue. Okay. Speaking of ZBA, I'd like to, the clock, the grandfather clocks are starting to ding in the background. We'll follow up with conversation with folks and clarify all this. I'd like to switch to the next topic, and that is the 2 vacancy announcements that were in the packet. They're all in the packet, but these in particular are the draft 2026 Bulletin Board Zoning Board of Appeals announcement and vacancy announcement for the Planning Board. The suggested changes to this year's draft are in red text, and maybe we could pull those up. I'm happy to share. Let's see. Oh, Mandy's ahead of me.
I happened to click on ZBA first, so
Great.
ZBA is the one that's off.
Great. So the change from last year is that it's 2026, and that instead of repeating ZBA, Zoning Board of Appeals, throughout the document, we can call it ZBA right up front. There are 2 vacancies for full members, parens, for 3-year terms to expire June 30, 2029. And up to 4 vacancies for associate members, parens, for 1-year terms to expire June 30, 2027. on the ZBA. The new terms would begin on July 1, 2026. Does that make sense? Any objections? I see no hands. The other change is that Andy Churchill's name is listed as vice chair, and his contact information is included instead of Jennifer's was there last year.
Jennifer, I want to pick your brain at some point.
Sorry,
Any,
the wrong button.
can I
Yes,
get-
that's fine. That'd be good.
Can I get a motion to adopt these changes as approved, and then a clean copy will go to the clerk of the town council for posting on the bulletin board. Jennifer,
I move that we adopt the the posting as amended.
Second,
let's take a vote. Jennifer,
Yes.
Pam, yes. Andy,
yes.
Aye.
Oh,
and Andy,
yes.
and Alicia is not in my view site.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you.
You know, it's hard. We have Sam and Pam and Andy and Mandy, and
Yeah. Okay, let's move to the planning board announcement. And I will read it. The changes are that there are 3 vacancies, parens, for 3-year terms expiring on June 30, 2029. Period. The new terms would begin on July 1, 2026. The next change is down below. It says those who are currently serving on the board whose term is ending, and those who have submitted a CAF for the planning board within the past 2 years expressing interest in serving will be contacted to confirm your continued interest. If still interested, you will be asked to submit a new CAF. Use link above. So these are simply those who are currently serving and those who have submitted a CAF within the past 2 years need to submit a new CAF. And then thirdly, the change of Andy Churchill and his contact information instead of Jennifer's. Any suggestions or corrections? Anybody want to make a motion to adopt?
I move.
I move.
I move.
I second. Let's take a vote. Let's see. Counselor Walker,
Yes.
Andy Churchill,
Yes.
Jennifer Taub,
Yes.
Mandy Johanicky,
Aye.
Pam Rooney's an aye. So those 2 announcements are adopted, and I will correct the text, and I will send those to Athena to be posted, which is great. And then we need to go shake the bushes and get folks to actually apply for these boards. There is one other item. It's now 2:04. I've exceeded my 2 o'clock limit. Meeting minutes that Athena provided for us for, I think it was February 26th. Does anyone have any corrections or changes needed for those minutes? I see no hands. I'm going to make a motion to adopt as provided.
Second.
Second.
Counselor Walker,
Yeah.
Andy Churchill,
Yes.
Mandy Johanicky,
Aye.
Jennifer Taub,
Yes.
and Pam Rooney's a yes, so that's unanimous. Thank you. That is the bulk of our meeting. If you all
Thank
want to
you.
continue talking, you can. If someone wants to make a motion to adjourn the meeting, you may.
I move we adjourn.
I'll second.
Counselor
We don't
Walker.
want you to be left out.
Counselor Walker,
Yeah.
Jennifer Taub,
Yes.
Pam Rooney's a yes, Mandy Jo,
Aye.
Andy Churchill.
Yes.
Thank you for your flexibility, everyone. Thank you, Stephanie, Nate, and Dave, and we'll talk again just to clarify the next couple of weeks, the next couple of meetings. Thank you all very much for accommodating me.
Our
Bye.
pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.